The inspiration for these videos often comes from a comment in previous videos, and this one's no exception. Following our Mark Evans is Born series, Jason and the Dead Stig reminded me of a program called Kit Car Crisis, which I'll be honest had slipped from my memory. Now this one at the time it was original airing did cause quite a lot of chatter, shall we say, on the forums at the time, Kit Car and so on. And not only that, it ended rather abruptly after 9 episodes, and there was never really an answer to that one. And since then, all video and everything else of that series seems to have disappeared from the internet, which is a bit odd. I've done some investigating. Let me show you what I found out. The first episode of Kit Car Crisis aired in May 2005, and the basic premise of the program was that Mark, who was a complete novice, it appears, to car building and to racing, was going to build a Dominator TS400 car, which was basically a space frame factory race car with a mid-mounted motorcycle engine, and the intention was he would build it through the series, and at the end of the series he would enter it into a race as part of the RGB, or road going bike engined race series, which was an ultra competitive series in the early 2000s. Mark created himself a few obstacles on this one. He decided to build a car in a freshly built shed at the bottom of his garden. Well, that seems fine. Unfortunately, he had a terraced house with no rear access. So when it came to getting the car out, we had to take the front off the shed, put the car on a trailer which had been lifted in by a crane, and then the crane lifted the car and the trailer back out. As is often the case when these things end fairly unhappily, a few years later, more facts on what actually went on came out. And in 2012, Paul, who was the owner of Dominator Cars, put this long post on the Low Cost Builders forum detailing sort of basically his version of what had happened. And I'm going to pick the pertinent sort of factual points out of this one just to give you a feel of what happened. Now, Paul's first encounter with Mark is when he got a phone call saying, would you be interested in basically supplying the kit and also giving some ongoing support for this sort of TV program that I'm going to be doing. And from a small manufacturer's point of view, you can think, oh, this would be quite interesting. Mark explained that Discovery were the ones that were commissioning it, and yeah, Paul was sort of interested, and the title of the program at that time was Man on a Mission, not Kit Car Crisis. We'll come to that changeover in a bit. Now, as Paul understands it, the basic outline of how the numbers worked, Mark had written the program, gone to Discovery. Discovery had agreed to commission it. They were going to get a production company to do the filming. Mark was being paid a sum of money by Discovery. Paul believes this was about £16,000. And then from that, Mark was able to go out there, purchase the kit, and the body chassis kit was somewhere in the region of £8,000. And then Mark was free to go and get sponsorship, whether it be parts, just cash, or facilities like or track day, that kind of thing, or dyno and so on. So Paul's view was they were a relatively small company. Dominator themselves produced over time about 9 of these cars. So it wasn't as though it was a prototype. So, they weren't the biggest kit car manufacturer, but they also weren't the smallest. So Paul thought, yeah, this could be of interest. Immediately, the first problem was he was given about 2 hours to decide whether or not he wanted to go ahead with it. And it was like, oh, this is a bit of a push. And then on the back of it, they needed to have a chassis within a couple of weeks. Now, most kit car manufacturers don't have chassis sort of piled up on the shelf waiting for a phone call. So Paul decided, yeah, this could be good publicity. Discovery's behind it. Let's go for it. They loaned a chassis out to Hull University, so they recalled that and were finishing it off, ready for Mark to take it on. And this is where Paul feels problem 3 arrived. Mark obtained quite a number of parts free of charge, and this was sort of basically his side of getting the sponsorship, and this included the brakes, the rear diff, if you remember the series, that will come back later, the dampers, pedal box, and so on. Now, I can see from Mark's point of view, he probably thought, this is great, I'm saving lots of money, people are supplying these parts, so I haven't got to buy them. The problem is, from Paul's side of things, this was effectively a nightmare. and he did everything he says he could do to talk Mark out of it. And I can't talk for Paul, but in hindsight, this is probably the point where he should have insisted you use my parts, because I'm going to talk to you about something called Rule of 9, and this goes for modified cars, but particularly for kit cars. Now, this car of mine, it was built with a Ford Pinto engine. Fine. I've changed that engine for a Ford Zetec engine out of a later Ford. Now, as I was installing that, and I put this in about 2008, so I was one of the first people to put one of those engines in this car, I discovered I then had to move the engine forward so it didn't catch the chassis at the back. So that meant I had to move the gearbox forward. So then I had to change the prop shaft, I had to change the engine mounts, the gearbox mounts, I had to change how the speedo was driven. Can you get where I go? And the rule of 9 is if you move one thing, you generally affect 9 others. And if you can imagine that happening with Paul with this car, that if he's suddenly putting on different pedal boxes and so on, and you know, using different dampers and etc., it's going to escalate. Anyway, reluctantly, Paul agreed to work with the parts that Mark was getting, and he believed that there would be an amount of testing time at the track for them to be able to fine-tune all these bits, because bringing in all these different components into a car which wasn't designed for them, there's going to be, you know, time needed to fettle them and get everything to work together correctly. So the start of filming arrived, and Paul trekked down from Hull down to Hertfordshire where Mark was based, and they had a quick discussion of how they were going to show them arriving, carry the chassis through the house, which is, it's, I can see that's, most people are going, well, that was bloody stupid, but it made good telly, didn't it? You know, the car being lifted over the house. And it was this point where a new problem turned up that Paul wasn't aware of. And if you remember the series, Mark originally ordered a different kit. He ordered an AGM WLR, which was a Ford Sierra based kit. So it was front engine rear drive, had a look very similar. Do you remember the Panos Le Mans car? It was that kind of look, but he wanted to fit a bike engine into it. And the manufacturer of that one turned up with it. They had a bit of a discussion, and he took his kit away. Probably, as how things turned out, he probably did the right thing. But Mark said that manufacturer had still got his money and he was yet to return it. So he wasn't able to pay Paul straight away, but he said, as soon as the money comes in, I'll pay you. And Paul obviously coughed a bit, but he said, well, Discovery Channel is backing this, so, you know, it's got to be safe, hasn't it? Paul says the initial filming this actually went okay. He said there was more support required than what he'd originally envisaged, but he sort of was like, well, it's going to be good publicity. He said he was a bit frustrated because they would come down, they would work through a number of jobs, they'd done a lot of modification to incorporate the alternative parts that Mark had acquired, and they would leave him a list of jobs to do, but when they returned, they wouldn't all be done, and they were then having to do those jobs to catch up, to try and keep up with the filming schedule. Paul started to get concerns when, after filming the third episode, he discovered that it was no longer going to be called Man on a Mission, and it was now going to be called Kit Car Crisis. And he didn't like the idea of this, probably understandably, that it was going to sound like there was lots of problems and so on, and maybe it wasn't going to be quite the good publicity he originally thought. However, he kept thinking, no, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. But then we hit problem 5, where Mark was not very happy. They showed Mark and Paul their sort of cut of the first few episodes, and apparently Mark was very upset how he was portrayed, said it made him look an idiot, and insisted that Discovery, or the production company, did some re-editing to make him look a lot better, which they did agree to do. So the first episode gets released, and actually it goes down quite well. Apparently it was top rated on Discovery on its initial episode, and, you know, maybe things are going to be okay. He said Paul is quite concerned. There's still 4 episodes to film. The first one's aired, so obviously now the time pressure is on. The car is far from finished. He says he's still not been paid for the body chassis kit. He was given one cheque for £1,800, but that bounced apparently. And during this period, Mark apparently had his first go in a bike-engined sort of kit car of some form, and apparently had completely terrified himself. And Paul thinks this is the moment where Mark's enthusiasm for the whole project did take quite a downturn. Now, of course, with all these concerns of Paul, you could say, well, why didn't you pull out? And that was one question I sort of pondered on. And it's easy to say that, sat at home on your sofa watching it, saying, oh, you should have walked away. I don't know what contractual obligations Paul had, but can you imagine the bad PR he would have got by just walking away from it in the middle? It would have all been his fault, etc., etc. And he was still on the hope, I imagine, that this was actually going to turn out okay. You know, they'd have a built car, they could see it racing around the circuit, and Mark having a go in a race at the end of the series. So I can see why he carried on. Now, there was a bit of I don't know if I call it incident. Paul's made reference to it, and I've had other comments from a relation of the person who was involved, that the company that made the exhaust, apparently they spent the day making the exhaust for the car, and when Mark went to collect it, apparently he allegedly said, oh well, this is part of the kit and Dominator will pay for that. And they basically said, well, no, that's not what we've been told, you need to pay before you go. Mark wouldn't pay, so to enable him to release the car, the production company or one of the staff actually paid for the exhaust. And then we get to what Paul describes as dreaded episode 9, which turned out to be the episode 9 turned out to be the final episode of the 10-part series. This was going to be the first test. Well, as you may remember, it didn't get very far. There was a suspension bracket which Mark had cut off, and one of his friends had re-welded on, and that broke off when somebody jumped up and down on the chassis to test the suspension. And when they did, I think they, from memory, and this is because we can't find any of the footage online, from memory, that they put it into gear, went to drive it, and the diff bracket broke. And I think, and I'm sure Paul will get in touch to tell me if different, I think that was a modification to the chassis that Paul had done, and that failed. So overall, it didn't go very far. And then the backup problem to this was that Paul, apparently, when they were doing this episode, was on holiday, so he wasn't able to be there to maybe, fabricate something to fix the problem. So when Paul gets back off his holiday, he gets a fairly panicked phone call off the production company saying, can you come down and have a look at the car? We've got a few problems. And this was problem number 6, that Mark had apparently been shown the next 2 episodes of the programme, and at that point decided they were showing him in such a bad light that he was no longer going to be involved with the project whatsoever, and basically walked away. Now, apparently, Discovery decided to go down the legal route, according to Paul. I don't know how far they got with it, but as we know, there was no episode 10. Paul said he was prepared to dive in to get the car up and running, so at least they could show it driving around the track, even if it wasn't racing. But Mark refused to be involved anymore, so that's why it ended so abruptly after episode 9. So as you can probably guess, that car was never actually finished. Paul himself, he said he was never paid for the body chassis kit. He was paid, he says, about a third of the sum he was owed for additional parts. He did decide to pursue Mark through the court system and says he got a judgment in his favour. However, he never received either the body chassis kit back or any monies. So what happened to the car? Well, I can find reference to posts suggesting it was being offered for sale as an unfinished project. So this would have been around sort of 05-06 time. But it appears it didn't sell as that. Someone else subsequently purchased the body shell from it, and they took it and used it on a MK GT1, which had a very similar body shell. And they ultimately sold that car over to someone in Holland. They said when they picked up the body shell, the chassis itself was still in Mark's garden, sat on its side, basically rusting away. And what of Dominator? Well, Paul says following the programme, inquiries for the car took a significant dive. They did build a few more afterwards. He also said that he just struck a deal with a guy in Australia to produce the car under licence, whereby they would supply the sort of Southeast Asia market. But following the programme and what they considered as bad publicity, they pulled out of that deal. So overall, a bit of an unhappy ending there. But coming back to where I started the subject, why has this programme more or less been deleted from the internet? It's bizarre. You go on to Google, search kit car crisis in speech marks, videos, no result, which is completely bonkers. And going through, it is sort of listed on the Discovery site but doesn't seem playable and is not listed anywhere on any of their channels. Last reference I can see to it actually being available was 2018. On all the various sort of streaming type online services, Watchable, TV Time, even joined one called Tracked, which I believe had it listed, but no, it wasn't playable. And on YouTube, the only reference I can find is this this channel, which established in 2022, so it's not that long ago. They had it listed, but they've all been made unwatchable, so it's all a bit odd. Possibly Discovery decided it wasn't their proudest moment and have basically done everything they can to bury it. That's the only thing I can think. You know, in the terms of what they're probably throwing Richard Hammond for the smallest cog, it was a small investment a long time ago. They've moved on. It's time to bury it. Don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But let's not have an unhappy ending. Let's have a happy ending and take a look at Campervan Crisis and Beetle Crisis. Campervan Crisis came along in 2006 and it starred Nigel, who was going to restore his 1965 Volkswagen Type 2 split screen campervan, registration number DYP129C, and this gave it the nickname of Dipsy. Now, again, we played this game of, you know, trying to complete the restoration for a certain date and all that, you know, American chopper style cobblers. But to be fair, by the end of the series, Nigel had completed the restoration if it wasn't in the original time frame that he planned. And we can see, post the programme, the van is still very much about. On the 914world.com forum, Cal914 posted this picture of Nigel with Dipsy at the Stamford Hall meet in 2014. And in 2021, Baron von Kronken, yes, I did have to read that, posted a picture of the van at the British VW Fest. And if we look at my car check, there's had no change of that keeper for that van since May 1994, so we can assume that is very safely still in Nigel's hands. And if we look at DVLA, we can see it's currently on Sawn, so probably just taken off the road for the winter, shall we say. Following on from Campervan Crisis, we had Beetle Crisis, and this first aired in Jan 2007. And this is where Nigel, along with his friend Steve, had decided to restore a 1971 Beetle registration number SJO387J. And their plan was to give this a bit of what they call a Euro look, so sort of modernise it to, you know, 90s, 2000s style. And they did such radical modifications, and this will age it as fitting a PlayStation 2. Now, as expected, and we got used to this, they missed the deadline, but the car was completed within the 5-part series. And if we check on its current health on My Car Check, it actually is still in the same hands since May 2006. So with the programme airing beginning of 07, that sounds reasonable. Which one of them actually took ownership of that car? They've still got it and enjoying it. And if we look on DVLA, even better, it's currently taxed. Well, it'll be historic tax, so it's free of charge, and it's, you know, out there being enjoyed. And before anybody mentions it, yes, there was Beetle Crisis 2. That came along later in 2007, was a 10-part series, but that never really focused on one specific vehicle. It was more about the antics of the race shack business where the rolling road and all the tuning happened. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that one. Maybe a little bit different than what we normally do. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. In the end, so the There you go. Have an outtake. I hadn't done any up till then.